We're finally taking the Willys Wagon off-road and seeing how this build does. Alright, so we're just driving around trying to explore, and the temperature is getting really hot. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Rustomod. We're finally taking the Willys Wagon off-road and seeing how this build does off-road. We've done a lot of on-road driving with Power Tour. We tried to see how it does just driving around town, but finally we're trying to drive this thing off-road and see how its capabilities are with the Jeep Wrangler chassis swap underneath. So to do our off-road test, we are in Coroba, North Carolina. And this is basically the top end of the Outer Banks. And from here all the way to the Virginia line is all off-road four-wheel drive beach. So to be able to get up here, you have to have a four-wheel drive vehicle. And it's all sand. So there's a bunch of small trails back here, a bunch of sand. And so we thought this would be a perfect place to take the Willys, since it's basically a beach wagon. So that's what it was designed for, do some light trails. And I've been getting a lot of comments on the air conditioning video of how this is held up. And I'll get to all that in this episode. So let's try out the off-road capabilities of our Willys Wagon. So if you guys aren't familiar with the Willys Wagon build, I'll give you a quick rundown, but I'll link a better video that I went over the entire build here. Basically, this is a 1950 Willys Wagon that we ended up chassis swapping with a Jeep Wrangler. It's our early 2000s Jeep TJ, so you can see we have the coil spring suspension on the front. We actually lengthened the frame so that way it reaches the wheelbase of the Willys. It's basically a bone stock suspension. Underneath it does have lift springs, a few other modifications to be able to make it work underneath of the Willys. But then we have a Volkswagen turbo diesel, which is a pretty common swap on the Jeep Wranglers. So this is a ALH TDI that we actually ended up just putting in. So this is kind of a good shakedown of the motor. So it does have a mechanical injection pump, and it is basically fully mechanical. And then behind it is a 700R4 Chevrolet transmission with a 241C transfer case. So it is kind of an odd setup, but it works really good. We're trying to dial in the TDI to make sure that this thing works good. We do have the electric air conditioning, and we got rid of our electric power steering, and we're just running the regular Volkswagen power steering pump on this. So the big question was the air conditioning, and we kind of have an odd setup on it because we were running the electric power steering and the electric air conditioning. So we have two batteries in here. Now one battery is on a charge controller, so when you flip this, it allows both the batteries to charge, and we can run our electric air conditioning solely off of this one battery. Before we were running both the electric power steering and the electric air conditioning on this, and what was happening was the electric air conditioning controller was shutting off because the battery was draining. Because we were using the power steering constantly, it was constantly trying to charge the battery, and once the voltage drops down, the air conditioning compressor will shut off. So hopefully we alleviate that problem with going to the manual power steering. So we're going to try to test it out today and see how it works. We really haven't had time to test the air conditioning since we had swapped it over, so this is going to be a great test today. So on the interior, we have these seats from a Volvo SUV. One of them is getting really torn up, unfortunately, from jumping in and out of this thing, so the side of the driver's seat is really ripped, so we're going to have to try to fix that. Everything else is pretty much the same as it was. The carpet is really sandy now, so I would probably rather put rubber floors in this if we're going to do this kind of thing with it, but it's fine for now. We do have to do some door panels and stuff still, and the headliner, but we're just trying to do a shakedown test and see how this thing does off-road. Not saying that this is a real off-road test. It's going to be a good test just to do some light off-road trails to see how it does. So we're going to try to fire this thing up and see how it does on the sand. Alright, so we're just driving around trying to explore, and the temperature is getting really hot. So we're gonna try to spray it with this, fill this with water and see if it cools it down some. Right now the Willys is getting a little hot, so we had the original fan on there from where the air conditioning kit came from, and I think it's just not strong enough to be able to cool this thing down when we're just kind of putting along. On the highway and stuff it's fine, we're driving around on normal roads, but whenever we're going off-road, it's lugging the motor down. It has a lot more stress on everything, and it is getting a little bit hot. Right a little bit above 220, just a little bit too hot than where we'd like to run it. We obviously don't want to hurt this motor since it's the second motor that we put in here with a heating problem. So we're trying to keep it cool and just take our time. But that's one thing when we get back to the shop, we're gonna have to upgrade. So we got the air conditioning hooked up. A lot of you guys were asking how this is holding up. So we're gonna try to turn it on. And it's cold. It's definitely cold. So the problem we were having before is with the electric air conditioning, the battery was just draining down, and then because we had the electric power steering also. So we'll try to drive around and see if it'll shut off, but right now it's still blowing pretty cold. Alright, we've been driving for a little bit down the beach. Electric air conditioning is still cold. So hopefully that was the problem, was the battery just going dead, but it's still cold. We're gonna keep driving and see if this thing will shut off, but hopefully it keeps running, but it's working really good right now. Well, we had to pull over again because the Willys is still getting a little hot. So you can see our temperature gauge is up around like 225. So pulled over, probably because the air conditioning condenser is in front of the radiator. It's causing more heat, but this thing is still blowing cold, which is good. I linked in that video the kit that we got for the electric air conditioning and stuff. It was a cheap eBay kit, and it did come with electric fan and condenser and everything. So maybe upgrade the fan that came with that kit and we'll probably be good, because that's literally the whole fan that we're using for the entire cooling system on the Willys. Definitely need to upgrade that. I think the radiator is quite oversized for the engine, so I don't think the radiator is too small or anything like that. I just think we have air conditioning, we have an intercooler, we have a bunch of stuff blocking the radiator, and we need a stronger fan to be able to pull air through all that. But as soon as we slow down here, the temp goes right back to normal, and it's still running pretty good. So air conditioning still cold, working good. The alternator is a 200 amp alternator. So the alternator is reading just under 12 volts. So it is drawing quite a bit of power from the battery from the alternator. So if you are going to do this thing, I would definitely recommend putting another battery in it and then putting a higher amperage alternator just to account for the power draw that this thing has. fun time doing some light off-roading with the Willys, and this is just a test to see how it does off-road. We definitely learned some stuff along the way, trying to figure out some issues, and that's pretty much what this trip is, just a shakedown on the Willys. Now we learned that the fan on the radiator is definitely not strong enough, so that's a good upgrade that we can do when we get back to the shop. So the other thing that we learned is that the air conditioning is working really good. So the 2 Optima battery system is working pretty good. We have that charge controller and it seems to be doing its job. The other thing that we had added to this is we added this catch can breather. We didn't have anything really letting the crankcase vent, so we added that and it worked pretty well. We added an additional temperature gauge onto this because we just wanted to verify that that temperature gauge that's in the Willys is correct, and it looks like it's pretty accurate. So we're just running a little bit hot, and we'll have to tackle that whenever we go back. But this is a great shakedown to see how this thing will do. When we go on some longer off-roading trips, this should be ready to go. We do have some interior stuff we have to finish, but for the most part, mechanically, it seems to be pretty good. We actually put a different torque converter in here because the stall on the converter that we had before was a little bit too low. So actually at idle, it was trying to lock the converter up, and we added a higher stall converter. It seems to be behaving much better than it was before. That's pretty much it on the Willys. We're gonna just try to take this thing back to the shop, try to get all these issues ironed out, and then we'll try it again next time. If you guys want to see what we're going to do next with the Willys wagon, make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the episodes we have here on the Willys and all the other projects we have here on Rustomod. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode.